Nyhtēaten, lumens flickered around the landing platform. Servo skulls patrolled the perimeter of the light dome, scanning for movement in the dust-choked air. The shuttle sat motionless, its rear doors sealed to maintain internal pressure. Even so, Asbjorn kept his helm in place, visor up. He lounged back in the pilot's seat, relaxed in posture, but hands resting near the controls, ready to act in an instant. Beside him, Skiteri Delta 79 sat in the Vox station, his metallic fingers working a failing set of relays. The shuttle's external Vox booster was nearly useless this close to the atmospheric generators. The charged particulates in the fledgling moon air disrupted signal clarity. Still, Delta worked diligently, trying to reach the modular Elebend command tower. So far, no success. He looked up briefly at the tower's distant windows. A shadow passed behind one. Cole? Maybe. Delta gave a casual wave anyway, then returned to his task. High above, on the upper gantry of modular Elebend, Bjornwolf stood at the window, arms folded, silent. He watched the shuttle below. He thought he saw movement inside. Maybe Asbjorn adjusting controls. Maybe just the flicker of lumens reflected in the hull. He was uneasy. Osborne was still aboard, not alone, but only with Delta. The Skitarii had proven to be a Vox adept, and now was their best hope at re-establishing communication beyond the moon. Still, leaving the shuttle with such light protection gnawed at him. But the others had been clear. The Nyhtēaten hadn't shown any interest in the exterior. They didn't hunt the cold or the empty, not unless large numbers gathered. Still, it unsettled him. He turned his gaze upward through the vapor trails of the atmospheric processors. NihtWyrtha loomed overhead, suspended like an emerald stone. Its swirling green seas glinted in the sunlight, the lines of summer storms curling across the equator like ink drawn across glass. From here it looked peaceful, as if sleeping. Inside the chamber, Scion Scout Cole N3 finished his report. His tone was level, measured, professional, but his hands remained tightly clenched, and the tension in his stance betrayed his fatigue. "We were in Tunnel 41C, he began. A false wall cracked open by moonquakes. Behind it, we found a cavern, like a morgue, filled with skeletal remains. All showed signs of exterminatus protocol, just like the records from Geofon Brick Station." He paused. Beyond that was a lake, frozen over, and beneath the ice, creatures, dozens, hundreds. He looked down, then continued. "Vox Delta 79 and I found Modular Bill already overrun. No signals. We followed old maintenance tunnels. Eventually made it near Elebend. That's when brothers Osric and Nathaniel pulled us out." A moment of silence followed. Then Brother Osric stepped forward, his black Menk 3 plate scarred by claw marks and smeared with soot and frozen ichor. "We'd been sweeping Elebend already," he said. "Brother Nathaniel led the secondary muster once we lost contact with the other modules. But even then, we didn't know what we were facing." Captain Bjortham of the Navis Astra Wigathane took up the account. "From what we've pieced together," he said, "it started in Modular Fote. The excavation teams must have breached another chamber of the underground lake. That's where they awakened the Nyhtēaten. No reports were ever filed. We suspect a group of escaping workers, probably in panic, crashed a transport into the Vox Tower cables. That's why the colony went silent." He glanced to the others. "And we can only assume Magos Danuit is among the casualties. Modular Bill was overrun before anyone could organize a response. As far as we go, here in Modular Elebend." The Hlaford had readied a force to go and check the other stations, loading up the transports. But the Nyhtēaten flooded in when the outer airlock were opened. He did not know what he was dealing with. He opened the inner locks to help those trapped, and, well, here we are. Bjornwolf clenched his fist at the senseless loss of the Wigathene. He had seen the bodies, cut down in ranks, still in muster formation. Most hadn't even drawn their weapons. The door hissed open. 2 servitors entered, dragging something heavy beneath a thick plastic sheet. They laid it on the steel table at the center of the room. A wave of stench hit them, sulfur, sharp and acrid, mixed with the unmistakable metallic tang of defrosted meat. Not rot, something colder, older. The kind of stink that clings to cryovaults and battlefield morgues. Most in the room stepped back, some covering their mouths, others switching on internal breathers. The body on the table was roughly man-sized, but its proportions were wrong, warped and swollen in places. The lower legs had twisted into thick, goat-like hooves. Its hands were fused into jagged, bladed claws, thick and amber-veined, as if light shone through warped glass. Stubby horns curled from its brow, and its jaws, twice broken and regrown, were lined with teeth more akin to deep-sea predators than anything mammalian. Steam curled from the corpse in the cold lab air. The gathered group, Bornwolf, Voratrix, Osric, and a cluster of Mechanicus personnel stood in grim silence. Brother Nathaniel stepped forward, servo-whining softly as he adjusted the wrist joint on his augmetic hand, scrolling through internal readings. Bornwolf looked down at the Nyhtēaten at his hip. It was dormant, his seeks too, no glow. "So it's not a demon," he said flatly. Nathaniel nodded. "That is correct." He tapped one of the twisted claws. "This husk is not a demon. It's like a footprint in the sand, not the foot itself." Archmagos Demia Voratrix stepped forward. The hum of her leg servos cut softly through the silence. She leaned over the body, ocular arrays narrowing. Steam curled around her cloak. "Forgive my ignorance, apothecary," she said, "but don't true daemons evaporate when their connection to the immaterium is severed?" Nathaniel didn't look up. "Correct." He turned back to the group. "I believe the Nyhtēaten are early, failed prototypes. This," he gestured at the corpse, "is a husk, a suit. I suspect the Inquisition would have a more thorough answer, but from what I can tell, the demon attempted to transmute the host body, to reshape it into something it could survive in." Sinwolf took a step back, face tight with revulsion. "Like wearing a human as clothing?" "Precisely," Nathaniel said. "They didn't understand our physics, our biology, so they tried to build an environment suit, like our cataphracti armor, something that could endure the pressure of real space." Voratrix was still hunched over the hand. A mechadendrite flared with scanning runes. "It scans as silica," she said. "Yes," said Nathaniel. "Daemons need powerful warp resonance to manifest in reality. This one was converting flesh into silicon, an exoform shell, strong, inert, like a gellar field on one of our void craft. It wouldn't unravel under natural law." He looked up at them. "And I believe that is why the original colonists misunderstood the threat. They thought they were being attacked by a silicon-based life form, a new infection. They didn't know it was demonic possession." Bjornwolf leaned in, brow furrowed. "So why don't daemons do this now?" he asked. "Or do they?" He meant it honestly. This was not his world. Before the others could respond, Voratrix spoke. "No, they don't," she said, her tone light. Too light. "We're looking at an early demon experiment. What clever little things they are. Little dreams wishing to be real. Their little excursion into reality clearly failed." Bjornwolf arched an eyebrow. "Failed? How?" Voratrix gave a soft, dark chuckle. "Because these fools spent thousands of years frozen in ice while the rest of the Neverborn were busy ruling the warp. By the time your men banished this one, I expect it returned to find itself very out of place, like some poor soul from the 15th millennium waking up today, lost, confused, obsolete." That earned a few dry smirks around the room, but Nathaniel remained grim. "I think it's worse than that," he said. The apothecary looked from face to face, pausing on each one. "What if, by binding themselves so completely to the host, to real space, they made themselves mortal?" The weight of those words settled like ash. No one replied. The silence stretched, because the idea itself twisted in too many directions for most of them to follow. A daemon, made mortal. A creature of unreality, suddenly bound by decay. The implications so intricate it went places few of their minds could follow, but Nathaniel held a look of concern, and Voratrix, looking back at him, gained a light smile. Bjornwolf noticed. He glanced between the two, Astartes apothecary, Archmagos prime, and decided he didn't want to know how deep their thoughts ran, or how closely aligned they might be. He cleared his throat. "All right," he said. "So how do we send them back to the warp?" He gave them both a hard look. "Or, as you say, banish them." Bjornwolf answered without hesitation. "Massed fire downrange, heat slows them. Heavy rounds dismember. Once a limb is separated, it goes inert. And if it's already been heated, plasma or melta, it crumbles into a kind of sand." Osric pulled his Nyhtēaten. "Disruptor weapons disintegrates them instantly." Voratrix, examining one of the claws with a servo-mounted lens, said, "Makes complete sense. Disruptors open the shell, exposing the Neverborn to reality while breaking the silica bonds. In effect, the Nyhtēaten suffers a reality hemorrhage." Bjornwolf's expression didn't change. So we can kill them, he said flatly. How many are there? Cole answered first. Under the ice? If my Auspex readings were accurate, based on cavern volume and what I could see, maybe 1,000. He hesitated. And if the caverns continue past my scans, potentially many more. Osric stepped in. At least 40 still active in the modules. We've confirmed numerous kills here in Eliband alone, but we have to assume the numbers will grow as more awaken. Voratrix didn't look up. Her mechanical fingers turned the warped claw in the lumen light, while one of her mechadendrites spun lazily, analyzing silica traces. She spoke at last, calm, clinical, unfazed. The thaw is the result of Fistbala Station's growth. As the orbital facility expands, its gravitational impact on Nyhtēaten increases. This, combined with deep atmospheric agitation from terraforming condensers, has destabilized the subsurface ice structures, moonquakes, thermal pressure, sublimation cycles. She finally looked up. The conditions that kept these entities frozen for millennia are no longer stable, so we must refreeze them, and once that's done, deal with them at our leisure. Nathaniel spoke firmly. Chaplain Wolfgar will demand an exterminatus. Voratrix nodded. Yes, he does enjoy explosions, but this isn't a growing threat. Every Nyhtēaten we destroy is one less. They're not multiplying, they're simply waking up. Bjornwolf frowned. So your plan is to freeze them again? She stepped to a nearby cogitator station and overrode the locks with a flick of her wrist. A holographic schematic bloomed in the air, cavern networks glowing in cold blue. I am no tactician, she said, with a slight tilt of her head, but a Mechanicus solution is straightforward. She tapped at the map. A series of atmospheric relay nodes blinked into focus. Bjornwolf squinted. Don't those make air? That won't make refrigeration. She turned to him sharply, like a teacher correcting a dull student. They don't make air. They regulate pressure and temperature by dispersing greenhouse aerosols, primarily nitrogen. As ice melts, oxygen is released naturally. The condensers create structure. They don't fabricate. Osric nodded like he understood. Bjornwolf did not, but he nodded anyway. So your plan is? She smiled. Obviously, deploy cryonic stabilizers, atmospheric field casters, modified to emit cold plasma and pressure-locked coolant pulses. We can refreeze the lake, reinforce the caverns, and slow the awakening. She glanced toward the Astartes. Once stabilized, we send in kill teams to finish the work, at your leisure. Grimhelm muttered something under his breath. Nathaniel leaned forward. Chaplain Wolfgar would suggest. He probably would, Voratrix cut him off. But if containment is your goal, then delay is your best tool. Without fresh warmth or motion, these husks may return to dormancy. They're daemons, but they're bound now by physical law. She fixed her gaze on Nathaniel. And more importantly, only we in this room know this is a demonic problem. To everyone else, this is a Xenos incident, a burrowing, silicon-based life form awakened by mining. Bjornwolf narrowed his eyes. Why lie? Voratrix shook her head gently. Because daemons gain strength through human emotion, fear, anger, despair. Naming them feeds them. Panic feeds them. Silence is safety. She turned her sharp gaze to Cuthelm. On that subject, anything we need to know? The seer had been quiet until now. I sense shadows, he said softly, still circling all three modules, but nothing else. Good, Voratrix replied, then turning to the room. Shall we begin? Outside, and far below the command spire, servitor skulls drifted with a low hum as the trio skimmed the circumference of the landing pad. There was a breeze, faint, not enough to feel on a world with a proper atmosphere. But in Nithelm's thin air, it was enough to stir up a haze of fine regolith, whispering across the surface. Osbjorn blinked, pulled from his half-doze by a sharp squeal of Binaric. He glanced back toward the Auspex and Vox suite. Skitari Delta 79 was crouched over the console, holding up a thin connection wire, patting the cogitator beside him with something like affection. Osbjorn leaned closer. The entire Vox array was exposed, circuit panels open, wires crisscrossing like spider silk. A few handwritten purity seals had been slapped on awkward junctions, the kind of fieldwork that would make a tech priest faint. I used the degassing frame as a makeshift Vox emitter, Delta said proudly. Osbjorn blinked. Can we reach Fiskbala? Delta shook his head. Not that far, sadly, but I can patch through to the orbiting atmospheric monitoring satellites. Osbjorn nodded and grabbed the offered Vox pickup. He thumbed the activator. Any station, any station. This is Shuttle FS03. Request contact. Repeat. Request contact. Silence. Then static cleared, and a reply crackled through. This is Weather Station 06. We haven't heard from ground stations in hours. Everything sanguine? Osbjorn grinned. Negative. Major incident across Modular Fote and Modular Bill. Modular Eleben still holding. Request immediate full armed support. Can you relay to Fisbala Station? Moments passed. Then, Omnissiah, protect us. Relaying your signal, Emperor guard you until aid arrives. Osborne sagged back in his seat, exhaling hard. He looked over at Delta. Well done, he said, grinning. Delta set down his jury-rigging tool, shoulders slumping with relief. They're coming, he said. He smiled back. Outside, the servo skulls drifted silently, gliding along the circumference of the landing pad. The slight breeze, barely a breath in this thin proto-atmosphere, kicked up a veil of regolith. Moondust whispered across the landing zone like the ashes of forgotten time. One of the skulls paused mid-flight. It adjusted with a low hum, stabilizing on its limited repulsor field. A green scanning beam swept the haze. Nothing, just rust flakes. It logged the data, ready to transmit as soon as the Vox lines reopened. It didn't see the shape behind it. A chitinous blade lashed forward, slicing clean through the skull's cogitator core. The machine died mid-air, its eye dimming as it dropped to the dusty surface. From the shadows, the Nyhtēaten emerged. They stood tall, full height, eyes glinting with ancient malice. One lingered a moment longer, sniffing at the air. It had waited so long, trapped beneath the ice, frozen, but never truly asleep. It remembered everything: the first hunt, the first steps on real soil, the battle with the Imperials, the ship, the flood, the ice. It had raged for centuries, screamed silently against the grip of reality, its mind fracturing and reshaping again. Now it was free. They charged the shuttle, claws slashed, feet pounded metal. They climbed the hull, slicing at panels. They recognized it. This was a vessel. It could take them to the stars. They had come to reality as explorers. Now they would return as conquerors. Inside the shuttle, the hull rang with scraping and thuds. Delta looked to the auspex. The servo skulls aren't reporting, he said. Then the hiss. A breach. Osbjorn slammed his visor down. Fingers flicked over the control switches. Grav stabilizer, check. Motive force engine, check. Thruster primed. Behind him, Delta stood, pistol raised. Then the rear hatch burst inward, air roared outwards. The first Nyhtēaten was blown off its feet, howling in fury. But the others held on. They surged into the cabin, blades gouging into walls, snagging on fittings. Delta fired. Serpenta rounds scorched the first creature, its silica shell shattering into glass dust and steam. Another climbed over the wreckage. 3 more shots. It stumbled. A third lunged. Delta's pistol clicked empty. He grabbed a tool, blocked the claw, and the wrench exploded in his hand. The shuttle lifted. Osbjorn gritted his teeth, yanking on the stick. From the corner of his eye, he saw Delta still standing, bleeding, fighting. Osbjorn grabbed his side. Delta caught the auto pistol and fired. The rounds punched through one attacker's mask. Another screamed, shell fragmenting, ichor boiling in the thin air. Then, too fast, a claw impaled him, punching through his chest. Delta gasped, blood fogging his breather. The shuttle tilted. Osbjorn cursed. The port thruster had failed. More Nyhtēaten climbed in through the torn hatch, clawing, screeching. He hit the secondary boosters. The craft bucked violently, listing 30 degrees. Go, Delta gasped. He was still standing, but had not long left, his injuries great. He was clutching something. Osbjorn saw the grenade in Delta's cloak. Their eyes met. Delta smiled. Osbjorn didn't hesitate. He pulled the ejector lever. The canopy blasted open. He was launched skyward, harness ripping against his chest, the parachute struggling to catch in the moon's weak air. As he spun, the world below twisted. The shuttle tumbled in flame. Then the grenade went off. A white-hot burst erupted from the rear hatch, engulfing the cabin. The damaged thruster spun it sideways, then impact. The shuttle slammed into the dry lake bed. Its main fuel tanks ruptured, igniting in a tower of flame that lit the base like a second sun. Osbjorn saw it all. The ground rushed up, then blackness. Far above the surface of Nyhtēaten, the satellite weather station 006 drifted on its endless loop, its orbit precise, its purpose mundane. Inside, Adept Calculi Tricelium 23 adjusted his Vox controls for the 5th time in an hour. Nothing ever happened aboard the weather stations. A month ago, the first recorded sighting of a cumulus formation had sparked excitement across all 7 satellites, only to be revealed as a data ghost, a false reading. But today was different. A distress signal, an emergency relay. His heart quickened with the thrill of significance. He might be a hero. He leaned over the Vox array, fingers fluttering over controls. "Align the dish to Fiskballa Station," he ordered. Tiny servitors clanked to life, repositioning the external Vox dish with mechanical precision. The crew gathered around, murmuring with unaccustomed excitement. At last, purpose. Unseen, outside the station's sealed hull, condensation shimmered on the outer hatch, just a veil of frost, easy to miss. Within the frost, for a heartbeat, a face appeared, faint, smiling, horned. A servitor passed, heard something, a low chuckle, soft as ice cracking in water. But it was not programmed to report such things. The airlock seal hissed imperceptibly. Frost crept along the metal frame. A tiny gap in the alignment, barely a millimeter wide, was enough. Oxygen leaked. Moisture crystallized. Ice bloomed, growing outward from the hatch, reaching like fingers. Rust followed. Bolts corroded in seconds. One twisted free and drifted loose. Then another, and another. Inside, Tricelium smiled, watching the dish rotate into position. This was his moment. He reached for the Vox activator. "Fiskballa Station, this is Weather Station 006. I have..." A sudden snap cut the air. Then a groan. A deep metallic creak as the hatch bowed inward. Eyes turned. Too late. The hatch exploded outward, sheared open in a burst of ice and steel. A howling vortex of air screamed through the chamber. Tricelium's scream never left his lips. He was frozen in place, his skin cracked and graying. From below, it looked like a falling star. Weather Station 006 cracked apart mid-orbit, halved by decompression, fragments wreathed in flames as oxygen ignited within exposed compartments. Its shattered remains tumbled silently through Nyhtēaten's exosphere. The first recorded shooting star of the terraformed moon's history, a burning wreck, trailing a gas plume. Modular Bill. Bodies lay scattered across the steel corridors of Modular Bill, shattered plating, ruptured conduits, and splashes of red against gray stone. The floor was slick with the blood of fallen Skitarii. In the command nexus, Magos de Nyhtēaten lay slumped against a bulkhead, wounded, panting, his mechanical lungs wheezing like overworked furnaces. His right augmetic sparked as he struggled to reload his Serpenta rifle, shaking hands struggling to connect magazine to port. Around him, his Skitarii bodyguard were dead or dying. The walls were scarred by plasma bursts and huge claw marks. Somewhere down the hall, the sound of claws scraping metal grew louder. The Nyhtēaten approached. They moved in slowly, limbs jerking, malformed claws clicking on deck plating. Their warped shells glistened with frost and ichor, and then they stopped. Their heads turned to the hatchway behind Nyhtēaten. From the corridor beyond came the measured click of high-heeled boots, echoing unnaturally loud. Footsteps approached as if every step were chosen with care. One step landed on a slick of blood. Where the heel touched, it bloomed, a crystalline sprout, red as wine, glass-sharp and whisper-thin. It grew into a bladed grass. Magos de Nyhtēaten armed his trembling pistol. The door darkened and something stepped inside. She was tall, impossibly graceful. Clawed heels, sculpted armor, robes that shimmered like mist, caught in amethyst light. Her face, near human, turned toward de Nyhtēaten with gentle amusement. Twin grooves marred the steel-armored hatch frame, cut by her claws as she passed. Magos de Nyhtēaten looked up in horror, coughing blood. "Damon!" She smiled, eyes glowing faint violet. "Why, yes," she said, her voice a caress. "So pleased to meet you." He tried to raise his weapon. "I will not become one of your sniveling creatures, Neverborn," he rasped. She smiled wider. Her teeth were far too perfect. "Oh, of course not. Not you. You're experienced, wise, left to rot in this dust-covered moon by that red-robed witch of yours." She circled him slowly. "You should be an archmagos, not a relic left to corrode in rust." He blinked, his breath hitching, his steel augments faded into rust as she approached. "I will now bow." "I don't expect that either," the Neverborn said as she leaned close, clawed fingers tracing his cheek. "I cannot take your pain," she whispered. "That's not within my power, but I can make it enjoyable." He gave a strangled sound at first, then clearer, higher. Began to laugh. His limbs convulsed, flesh twisted, mechanics writhed, laughing. She turned without watching him fall. She had already seen it all. She felt the touch of Cuthelm's mind, and with little effort she created a mirage for him to look upon. His sight, blurred, as if something walked between realms, casting shadow over thought, but only saw shadows. As Cenarion stepped through the command archway, she paused. A Nyhtēaten groveled before her, one of the awakened husks. It writhed in recognition. She tilted her head and smiled with amusement. "Hello," she said, her voice rich and cold. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" She examined its silica shell, running a single claw across its surface. "Not Damon's anymore," she whispered. "No, failed echoes, embodying questions that should never have been asked." The creature trembled. She straightened, voice turning playful. "But don't worry. We Neverborn are still Neverborn." She turned away, walking through the broken halls, her heels clicking softly over crystal and bone. Behind her, the Nyhtēaten bowed low and began to chant in a language never meant for mouths. From the shadows, Mechanicus' wounded stirred, flesh bubbled. Green glowing pus seeped through veins. Augmetics curled into silicone blades. Cenarion laughed as she faded into the darkness of the lower tunnels.